Hey folks, this is Chris with the Human Project Podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about common myths that happen in marriage. What do people think about when they think of marriage? We're going to debunk 4 myths that are out there and talk about what is reality and how do we start to move more towards that. Excited for you to hear how we correct myths of marriage in this episode. Take a listen. Let us know what you think. Hey, Mark.
Hey there, Chris.
How's it going today?
We're having fun. It's good.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. You know what else is fun?
Oh boy. What?
It's been a while since we did a cheesy segue. Marriage.
Marriage?
Marriage is fun.
Is it really?
Yeah.
All the time, 100%, every minute.
No. Marriage is not happy every moment of every day. I think there is a myth. There's a lot of myths that are out there about marriage. Mm-hmm. One of them is that marriage is all about happiness, or it should always be perfect, or it should always be easy. And spoiler alert, what we're going to talk about in this episode is that is not always the case.
Yeah. I mean, it is true in my marriage, but for most marriages,
oh yeah,
it is
same.
Not the case.
Right. Those poor souls that don't
yeah.
have a perfect marriage.
If you believe that for even a second, then boy, do we have you fooled. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's challenge, it's struggle, it's beautiful, and it's real. I mean, it's one of those things. We've Christine and I have said it repeatedly about marriage and about raising kids. Like, this is no joke. This is real.
Yeah,
right here, and that's in the struggle and the challenge and the beauty way. It's all mixed together. You can't separate that stuff. It all belongs together. But I don't think, especially when people are thinking about getting married, I don't think that's how we're thinking of it.
Yeah.
Right. How we look at it. And I've started to realize, and I walked into marriage the same way, but I'm starting to realize the more I'm talking to engaged couples or young married couples, that there's a hidden assumption even that when we get married, it'll all be better. It'll all be fixed. Whatever thing that most bothers us or that we're struggling most against or that we hope most for is that somehow, saying our vows, getting married, that's just going to change.
Yeah. All of a sudden it's clicked. It's the end of the fairy tale right before it says, and they lived happily ever after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That's what's going to happen after this, right?
Yeah. And I think it can be really discouraging when we find that we are in the midst of the happily ever after, and it's not always happy after.
It's just ever after.
Yeah. And I think one of the challenges that I see coming up a lot is that anytime there is any kind of difficulty, it's more discouraging than what it ought to be. Because we have this expectation that everything is going to be rosy. I was talking to one of our friends who just got married and asking him, like, hey, how's it going? You still in the honeymoon stage? Because he'd only been married like 3 weeks at that time. And he's like, well, I hope I'm always in the honeymoon stage. Well, no, I don't think that's the case. I don't think there is a honeymoon stage. I want us to approach this with open eyes and know that it's going to be wonderful and challenging all at the same time. I'm like, yes, you are well prepared for this. And he's young. He's like 20 getting married. And it's just, yeah.
That's wisdom for that age.
Yes, he is very,
wiser
very
than
wise.
I was.
Yeah, same. Yeah, he's very wise in approaching it. And I'm like, that's good, because I think way too many of us go in like, oh yes, everything's wonderful and everything's perfect. And sets it up for when there is a very difficult spot that you go back to that and it's almost like a vow you made for yourself. Yes. If I'm not perfectly happy or everything's wonderful, then I have failed in marriage.
Or the other person has failed me. Blame must go somewhere.
Yeah.
And yeah, we gotta cast or assign that blame in some way. So it's gonna go one of those 2 ways typically.
Yeah. So I think what I'd like for us to do in this episode is talk about what are the most common myths in marriage, and then explore them and talk about what reality is.
Okay.
So first up, we've been hinting around this, but I think it's helpful to call out marriage always is a happy thing.
Yeah, that would be a myth.
That is myth number 1. The next one is conflict in marriage. That marriage is all about 2 extremes. Either we're fighting all the time or we never fight.
Yeah.
Because I think people go in like avoid marriage because they think it's going to be all conflict.
Okay.
Or they think, oh yeah, once we get married, there will be no conflict that happens.
You just agree on everything.
Yeah.
That's great.
Right. And then the third is marriage does not require sacrifice, which you can tell the thesis is that marriage does require sacrifice.
Right.
And we'll talk about what that's based on. And then the fourth is, I think you mentioned this earlier, that marriage solves everything. It'll get to happily ever after.
Yeah. We're happy.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about, being happy.
Yeah. So we've talked about the happiness. So what is the reality there? There is challenge, that there is difficulty, and we can have joy in the midst of the difficulty.
Yeah. It's appropriate that in talking about this, it sounds a bit like the Christian life, because it does. That, in this world you will have trouble, that there are going to be difficulties, there are going to be challenges, and that's true in marriage, definitely.
Yeah.
It's exponential in some ways, because you're taking two, putting together as one, and now all the things are now united, and that has some things that make that easier. There's some parts about that are easier because you have a support system ideally built in, and then you also have another imperfect human being and sinful human being that you're now partnered with, that you're knit together with, and their whole family. I mean, it's just, yeah, of course that's going to get messy.
Yeah.
Of course that's going to get messy.
Yeah.
And some of those things, yes, there will be some things solved in marriage, but it's not the solution for many things. It's not the solution for addiction. It's not the solution for trauma experienced before that moment. It's not going to, your spouse isn't suddenly going to be a better person or you a better person after you get married just because you have gotten married. That is not how that works.
Yeah. Ring on your finger does not instantly make you a better person.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because actually what you'll see over time is you start to learn more and more of the depths of who the other person is, even over a period of years and decades together.
Right.
Like, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are. You have the minor tics that annoy you about them. Like mine for Victoria is how loudly she walks for how tiny she is. She
Outsized.
walks so loud. We were working on our basement bathroom.
That just cracks me up.
We were working on our basement bathroom and we hear thump, 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 thump. And my friend's like, who's that upstairs? I'm like, that's Victoria. He's like, there's no way that's Victoria. But it's something she knows that annoys the snot out of me. But you'll find those
So
things.
she does it on purpose. No.
She doesn't know any other way. I still don't understand how, physically that should not happen. I want Isaac Newton to come back from the dead so he can evaluate this and find out what's going on. But you'll discover the things that annoy you about your spouse, and you can either choose to embrace it, like what I'm trying to do with Victoria's stomping, or they're the things that you can just get outsized reactions about because it's just a repeating, recurring thing.
Right. And I mean, you brought up an example that is funny to everybody but you.
Sometimes it's funny to me.
It's pretty funny. So we're all the way down to these little things like that. Like for me, and this isn't just Christine, but for some reason, we have two, sinks. And so I always try and make sure the dishes are all in one of the sinks so that if you need to do something in the other one, like wash dishes or rinse something or whatever, it's available. But as I like to say in my very nerdy way, it seems like the rest of my family wants to load balance the sinks for reasons that I don't understand. Oh, there's dishes in the right sink, but not in the left sink. I'll put the dish in the left sink because it looks lonely or something. I don't know. But that's just like an annoyance to me. And I go, why is that such a big deal? I mean, it's really not that. It's fine. So what? So from that level of thing, I just bring that up to say, yes, they're outside of me. That's just silly funny. So it's something that's annoyance level, as you said, and all the way through the whole spectrum of human sinfulness, we're gonna experience that kind of stuff with our spouse. And again, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't even have to be sin. Load balancing sinks it doesn't rise to the level of sinfulness.
Right.
But there are absolutely sins that will end up kind of popping out and hitting you in the face. Those different belief systems and value systems that we hold that we don't even realize we have deep inside of us under the scaffolding of beliefs, those things start to become more apparent to us, or at least the effect of those, when we're joined with somebody else and we go do something. And oftentimes it'll happen like the first holidays, the first Christmas as a married couple, where you're like, hey, we're going to go over and to go to this family, or we're going to go do this tradition, or we're not, and we're going to stay home or whatever. Like all those things just start to come out. And you're like, no, we don't do that. Well, wait, who's we? Right. And all those things inside of you don't even know where they're starting to be revealed. And that is just an example of over a period of time, what's going to continue to happen, that those things will continue to be revealed. And God wants to do that kind of surgery. That doesn't make it painless.
Right.
That makes it rich, rewarding, and there's pain involved.
Yeah. It's easy to look at those things just as a annoyance or just an inconvenience.
Yeah.
But really, what we've talked about is relationship is inherently inconvenient.
Yeah.
Marriage, so much so. Because you're no longer just you deciding in isolation where you can just pick whatever you want. You're now lovingly supposed to do that with somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think it reveals a lot of good challenges that come up in our way that we approach ourselves. It's very refining.
Yeah.
Like friendship is refining, iron sharpening iron. Marriage is like you're in the torch, or you're in the furnace together.
Right.
Then you had kids on top of that. Man, there is lots of refining and lots of sharpening happening.
Dude, because then you're in the furnace with a freaking mirror.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I don't like that look at all.
Yeah. And you're trying to keep something else out of the furnace. You're like, stop doing that. Yes. So marriage is like, refining really is an opportunity process. And it sounds like really cliche to say that.
Yeah.
But it's true because it reveals challenges. So we can approach that one of two ways. Like one, this is a drudgery. One, this is a challenge. One, this is, I don't like this. Or two, this is God working through me.
Yeah. This is intense discipleship.
Yeah. I think that's a great word for it, because looking at a non-Christian based marriage is not founded between two people that love Jesus and love each other. I have no idea why that many people stick together.
Yeah.
Like the only hope that can be found for marriage and us being able to lean into that refinement is because we know that Jesus, we know that Jesus meets the needs that we have.
Yeah.
We can tend to become way too reliant on the other person to meet our quote unquote needs.
Yeah.
And that is where I see so many marriages, even marriages that are Christian based, fail.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to get something out of the other person that we can only get from Jesus.
It's interesting in some ways. I think we may sound like we're talking out of both sides of our mouth, and I'll just make it a really clear point here that we may be sounding like we're really elevating marriage, because we are.
Yeah.
I think that is biblical, that it is a picture of Christ in the church, right? As a scale model, as I heard somebody say recently, of Christ in the church. That is a very high calling, very elevated.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, I couldn't agree with you more. It's not meant to fulfill all of our needs, that there are other things we need, other friendships and relationships, most importantly, directly with Christ. As well. So it's like absolutely elevated and also incomplete intentionally. Yeah. Which is a really weird, difficult thing to define, and absolutely a different definition than what you'll find in our culture today.
I think that's a great point. And that is why I think there is so much conflict potential in marriage. Like I said, I think this is another one of the myths, that we think that because it is an example of Christ in the church, that it's not going to be having conflict. But I think even just using that as an example, like, I don't know about you, but I see all kinds of conflict between the church and Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's healthy conflict. There is goodness there. I think the other challenge there is we tend to think of conflict like we avoid everything outside of us and we become our own little like isolated bubble. That's another healthy or unhealthy pattern I've seen for marriages.
Yeah.
Is we tend to isolate and not be in community. We love community. We've seen the worth of it. We've seen the value of it. And that is going to produce conflict between us as a married couple and the people outside of us.
Right.
So there's internally facing conflict and externally facing conflict.
Right.
And so that's good. If you never have conflict, it means you're probably not bringing up what is reality, and you're probably not dealing with stuff that needs to be dealt with.
Right.
And if there is only conflict, it means that you're probably not doing the work that God is revealing to you of where you need to put some things aside and sacrifice for your spouse.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh, that sounds like another whole episode. Sacrifice.
It could be. I think that's another one in here, though, of that there is no sacrifice in marriage. We can both always get what we want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's just simply not true of any relationship. Let's just start there, let alone one as knit together as marriage.
Yeah. I think you mentioned this in the dating episode of what does it look like to serve another person, whether it's somebody you're dating, whether it's somebody you want to be dating, and it becomes this pattern and building thing that you're doing for marriage.
Right.
How do I continue to serve my spouse?
So I think especially for us as husbands, the picture of Christ serving the church is obviously super high calling and extremely sacrificial.
Yeah.
Extremely sacrificial to a full extent.
Yeah.
And that is some of what we're called to in our marriage relationships. I always, as a husband, I'm thinking like, what in the world does this mean? I'm struggle with it. I'm challenged by it. I'm challenged by it to wash Christine with the word. That's one of the ways Paul says it. Like, what does that mean? What is the purpose of that?
Yeah.
That just wrestling with those types of things is more of the flavor, I think, of the biblical picture of marriage.
Yeah.
It's of mutual service to each other missionally and with each other missionally as well.
Yeah.
Not to lose myself. God made me the way that I am, and there's great purpose and intent in that, and their sacrifice in order to serve her, in order for us to serve together.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a wonderful example of this is we see Jesus doing this with washing the disciples' feet. And it's just such a powerful picture.
Yeah.
Because like the king on all high is not afraid to get down and wash the stinky, dirty feet.
Yeah.
And Victoria and I wanted to be really intentional about this in our marriage. So when we got married, one of the things that was part of our ceremony was we washed each other's feet.
Wow.
Victoria I washed her feet first and dried them. Very important. She wasn't wearing socks because it was like, I don't know, her shoes, but I was wearing socks. So she washed my feet, took the socks off, washed my feet, and then she forgot to dry my feet.
Oops.
So trying to put the sock back on
Doesn't work.
Like we had the song In Christ Alone, or the band was playing it while we were doing that. They had to play a couple extra verses while trying to get the sock on. And eventually, like I have the sock half on my foot and just put the shoe on. And I had to correct it after the ceremony. It was just really funny. It's one of those like your wedding day is just blurs by and you don't remember much of it. That is the clearest thing I remember from our wedding day is us washing each other's feet.
Fun.
But like we knew that going into this, that this would be a life of service to each other. And I think a lot of us tend to approach marriage and relationships in general of what can I get out of the other person? And I think a more healthy approach would be how can I serve the other person, outserve the other person?
Yeah. You put that in pretty male language, by the way, outserve, almost like there's a competition. Just saying. It's not just an observation. That would definitely speak to male desire. I think I'm just reflecting back on 28 years of marriage and some of the married couples that we've spent time around that have been excellent examples and have been struggling with things, the whole spectrum. And I think service of each other, like there's something about that reveals, or trying to do that, something about that reveals motive. Because when I am serving Christine well, then I don't even yes, I love her. This is how I'm loving her. You can see it. I know it. She knows it. All of that is right there. When I'm not serving her well, that's when you go like, wow, I'm just not loving her well. It's a fine way to say the same thing as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. Because they just fit together. Again, not that I'm surrendering who I am or everything. I have no boundaries whatsoever, but that I, just like Christ, as you said, he became a servant. I mean, in many ways, that was what a slave would do. A slave would wash the feet of the people in that room. And the king, the Most High King, did that, like absolutely upside down. And that's what we're called to do.
Yeah. Marriage is a very upside down thing where it is us parking a lot of our desires and loving. Yeah. Yeah. Because we are loving ourselves. Because we are one. Yeah. Yeah. So lots of myths to unpack. And I think we did just an introductory. I think it'd be interesting to hear what other myths people think and what other myths they're curious about or misconceptions in marriage. Yeah, I'd be interested in hear what other myths or topics people want to hear as it relates to marriage, and take it from our experiences with our spouses and what we've learned along the way. Yeah. So thanks for exploring that, buddy.
Yeah. Good stuff. Definitely. Yeah. This is where discipleship and holiness are. Yeah. Right here in the midst of this. So absolutely. Good territory to be in.
Absolutely. And lots of good stuff to be found along the way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Dear wifey, thank you. I appreciate you. Hey folks, thanks for tuning in today. Our team is made up of myself, Chris Conlin, and Mark Wavle, and our lead editor is Derek Donley. We're a crowd-funded nonprofit. Our free resources exist because of your generous support. To learn more about us or to check out classes that we talk about here, visit us at www.humanproject.us. Thanks for joining us on our mission to bring 1 million lives closer to the fullness of God's design.